these values, these tricks and these tips that you learn over time. You learn them from other parents. I learned a lot from coaching football and dealing with other kids, not just mine. One of the things that I used to teach my football kids was I had my big three and my little three. And my big three, I would stand at practice every day, and I gather all the kids around and say, all right, and I'd just hold up three fingers. And they'd all quieten down, and I'd say, what's Coach White's big three? And they'd all yell out attitude, attention, and effort. All right, what's Coach White's little three? Accountability, responsibility, humility. And over the course of a season, we would make sure that we kept hitting those big three, little three on what exactly they meant. So attitude, attention, and effort. I mean, these are simple tips on how to be a good person every day, right? And how to achieve something every day. Have a good attitude. When you wake up in the morning, you have a choice of whether or not you're going to have a good attitude or a bad attitude. When your boss tells you to do something, you have a choice of whether or not you're going to stick with that and have a good attitude, or whether you're going to be kind of upset about it. And I think if you have a good attitude, it opens up a part of you that's more, you become kind of a sponge. You're open up to learning at that point. You're opening up yourself to a little bit of experience. A bad attitude is kind of a barrier to growth in a lot of ways. You combine that with paying attention to what's around you all the time. Every little thing throughout your day, throughout just a regular boring day, if you pay attention, there's a lot of little good lessons in there. When the guy cuts you off in traffic, you have a lesson in patience, or you can explode and start yelling.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to another episode of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Paul White. Paul, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. Mm-hmm. Now, we're going to start off by asking the loaded question that we like to ask everyone to start the show. Who is Paul White?
Interesting phrasing of the question, and I know you've had at least a few guests answer this the same way, but I was a military guy for 21 years, and I think that there's a delusion, a trap that we all kind of fall into, especially as service members, when you devote your life to something like that you fall into this trap of that's kind of who you become. And it took me a long time and a lot of introspection to find out that was just something I did, not who I am. So that brings up an interesting question. Yeah, I've gotten to do a lot of cool things, and a lot of those things really defined who I was at a point, but it led me down this road. And I think, doing some reflection, I've really come to terms with, I'm Paul, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a son, all those good things, and then all of the coaching, the military, the experiences and the adventures, those are things that I did. So I like the way that you phrase that question. And I hope that people will get a chance to ask themselves that and kind of really break that down and maybe get to the root of who they are at some point.
Excellent. Well, I know the one thing there's a few things that we wanted to talk about today, but the one thing we kind of wanted to start off with is some of the experiences that you've actually put together in your new book that's coming out. I just will highlight that here. The book's called Work Hard, Don't Suck, which, if nothing else, I love the title.
I get that a lot. It seems to be very punchy. I think people can gravitate towards that. It's so simple and kind of in your face. That was what we were going for. And those are actually two separate chapters in the book. And I was going over it with a couple of friends one day. We were just going down the list of the table of contents, and it just kind of popped out to us. So like, oh, holy crap, this could totally be the title of the book. And it just kind of stuck. It's been hanging out there for about 8 months now.
Very good. Now, the premise of the book. So, actually, do you want to kind of go through the premise of the book, and then we'll kind of go down that road?
Yeah, sure. And this is something that you guys are probably no doubt going to experience one day. I think every parent does, and I'm not sure that any of us are really prepared for it. But my youngest son is a senior in high school right now. So about a year ago, he's a junior. It was January, I think, of last year. He came in from football practice one day. and no shirt, got his backpack, hat's on backwards, Beats headphones. He goes straight to his room, slams the door, never said a word. And I leaned up in my chair right at that moment and told my wife, I think we're done raising our kids. We've taught them right from wrong. They can feed and clothe themselves. They do their own laundry. I mean, they can get where they need to go. They know how to conduct themselves as good citizens. And I think that I took that very personally as a parent. And that was always our goal, was for our kids to be productive citizens in society, be good dudes, as we say around here. So seeing that we were kind of towards the end of that, and my kids, at a certain point, these stern lecture type talks, I don't think resonate as much as leading by example. And so I kind of changed my tactics a little bit. I had for a few years, and I tried to start leading a little bit more by example and leading from a position of love and being somebody that they would look up to for a moral compass and the character and things like that. So I decided I was going to write down all the dumb dad advice that I've been giving them for all these years in just bullet style format. And then I was going to write one 8.5 by 11 page on what each one of those topics meant. For example, a saying in our house, since our kids were young enough to understand it, is just be a good dude. That's all we wanted them to. Now, you could wrap a lot of stuff under that one statement, right? And really, you could personalize it to just about anything. And it's not just boys specific. You understand the analogy here is just be a good person, right? And so, excuse me, I wanted to kind of explain what that meant to me, and then give that to them as my goal was to have it done by Christmas, this past Christmas. And I met the goal. The problem was, though, is as I started writing these topics out, I ended up with 160 of them. So in my mind, anyways, that was going to be way too much for one book. I can't hand my 18-year-old a 400-page book of dad talk and expect him to read it, right? So I broke it down. I chose 60. I think it's 61, actually. There's 61 of them in the current version of Work Hard, Don't Suck. It's off right now to a set of beta readers that are going to be previewing it and maybe giving me some feedback on that. And then we'll look to get that thing on the shelves here, hopefully next month.
Excellent. So 61 topics from 160. So you had to definitely trim that down. So what we're, so obviously we have Be a Good Dude was kind of the first one that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And again, that would even be tough to keep that down to one page, I feel like.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a challenge for sure. I mean, some of them you had to kind of, what it gave me a chance to do, though, honestly, was very succinctly tell a story and hopefully relate that to a life lesson, which is really kind of what I was going for. And the working subtitle that I think I've kind of settled on, I think this is probably going to be the final subtitle that I'm working on, is Strategies and Tactics for Raising Children with Honor, Character, and Discipline. And they're short enough to where, I don't know if you remember like Uncle John's Bathroom Reader, just little short stories that you could read in just a few minutes. And each one of these is maybe 800 to 1,000 words. It doesn't take you more than 3 to 5 minutes to get through them. But you know what? If you're bored or you're waiting on somebody to get ready to go and you just want to read something real quick, you can thumb through here. Or if you're just curious about what the old man said about topic X, you can jump in there and see some of the behind the scenes of why we parented the way we did, why we made some of the decisions that we did, potentially apply that direction to your life or to your kids. I do have 3 grandkids that hopefully, my kids will pass some of these on. It gave me a good chance to capture a little bit of family history as I was telling some of these stories, because a lot of the hustle and grind that I put in as a young man in my early 20s, my kids weren't even born yet. So for me to get to tell them those stories and paint that picture for them about, hey, it wasn't always roses and unicorns and pixie dust around here. There was a lot of hard work and dirty coveralls that went along with this.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just going back to when you said, your son came in that day and, went in his room and you're like, I think we're done parenting. And I know exactly what you mean. Obviously, we know, that, well, I don't personally know because our kids aren't at that age, but when you say that, it's almost like that parenting shift, right? Where you're not teaching necessarily. You're not showing, giving them all the values that you want to instill in them and all that kind of stuff. You're almost there now to walk alongside them when they, whether they need support, different things like that. So how does that feel?
Well, I want to,
stage?
yeah, I want to rewind just a little bit and unpack something. You used the word parenting, and I used the word raising your kids. And I think that I honestly, and I'm not picking on anybody, but I think that those are two different things, because I don't think you'll ever stop being a parent. Hell, I'm almost 47 years old, and I was just talking to my mom today, and I was getting the earful from her about whatever we were talking about. So I think that part continues, and just by nature of the business, we are older, we're wiser. We've seen those mistakes. We know how life kind of unfolds. I'm getting to mentor all three of my sons and my bonus son through different things right now. And they're all at different levels. One's got 3 kids. The other one's going through a certification course for computer coding. And then the other 2 are trying to join the military. So I'm getting a chance to parent them on 3 different levels. And it's actually kind of cool and very challenging. And I like that. But the raising of your kids, look at it from a nature standpoint. At some point, mama kicks the baby off and the baby goes off on their own, and, and I think that what you said is not inaccurate, but I chose the words that I did very carefully. I don't think that I'm done parenting. I think that we'll be parents until either us or our kids die. But yes, you do end up in this kind of, so my wife and I've never been alone. When we started dating, she had a 1-year-old. And so now our kids are about to move out of the house, and we're going to be here just us and the dogs. And we've had some lengthy conversations about whether or not we're going to be able to handle this. I don't know, and there's always stop me if I'm talking too much, but there's always, I think, a great debate over, should you date and get married and then wait a while to have kids and, kind of soil your oats and go out and run around and party and go on trips and travel and do all this stuff? Or do you have kids early and then do all that stuff on the back end? And I don't know that there's a right answer to that. I can tell you that now, having the experience that we have and being in a little bit better of a financial place than I was when I was 23 when I got married, I think I'm going to enjoy it better now. So
yeah. No, I would have to agree. I think I think it's advantageous to get started early because, again, too, I think one of the other things my dad had me. I was the last born in my family when he was a bit older. So when I was really getting into sports and stuff, physically, it was difficult for him to do a lot of that stuff with me too. So, there's that whole element of it as well.
Yeah. That's natural. And we sit back and we joke about these people who are having kids when they're 45 or, 47 years old. Like, man, you're going to be 60 with a teenager in the house. That's the opposite of what I want. I'm still young enough to be able to go out and enjoy the rest of my life. My wife and I were actually doing some math the other day, and we're, like I said, we're almost 47. So, assuming that we live to our mid 70s, I think that's a reasonable expectation. We're fairly healthy people. We're not even halfway done yet. And that's pretty cool, to think about. And that's another thing. If you want to go down this little rabbit hole real quick, I think there's a really good discussion to be had at some point about, your priorities as your family. And I think a lot of people would advertise, oh, well, my kids have to be first. I'm always going to put my kids first. And I'm sorry, man, I just disagree with that. I think your spouse has to be your number one, because in the end, your kids are going to go off and do their own thing. Right. And they're going to start writing their own narrative at some point, realizing too, that if you, I read this in the beginning of this book, I've got a really cool quote from Aristotle. And in one of his books and one of his writings, he was writing about the relationship between parents and children. Parents love their kids the second that they're conceived, because it's part of you, right? You made that. I created this, and I will love you like no other until the day you die. Well, kids don't look at their parents that way, because they didn't create their parents. They depended on their parents for safety and nurture and security and warmth and food and all that good stuff. And eventually, as those kids grew up a little bit and could understand the concept of love, then that grew. And it almost starts as a dependency and then grows into love. Well, eventually, somewhere around that 18 to 21, 22-year-old mark, that's when your kids start to diverge a little bit and they have to go and write their own narratives. And I think that that's perfectly natural from a parent standpoint. Yeah, it kind of sucks because you're watching this. Like every time I see my 18-year-old, he's 6'3" and he's shredded. And every time he walks to the house, I'm thinking, man, I remember the day I counted all 10 of your toes. You know, when you first popped out into the world, I remember that second. And here you are cruising around, you know, getting ready to go off into the military and write your own story. And I think that I'm both proud and I'm sad at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely, that mix of emotions, right? When you're going through, and I think it's each parenting stage. It's like, okay, you're never going to see that parenting stage again, that raising of in that time frame. And even if you have other children to follow, it's going to look totally different, as we know, right? So
yeah, I don't know if you guys listen to Ed Milet at all, but he has a story that he talks about in some of his keynote speeches. And he and his son were going somewhere one day, and there was an elder gentleman sitting there at a car wash or something, I think is the way he tells the story. And he says the older gentleman asked how old the son is, and he says, well, he's 6. And he says, all right, well, enjoy this, because when he turns 7, the 6-year-old version of him is gone forever. And I think that that's just a really neat perspective for, if I could go back to day one of my kids when they were born and watching them grow up, I think I would have maybe hung on to those little moments just a little bit more. Obviously we've got the memories, and thank goodness for the digital age where, Facebook reminds you every year of the memories and all that cool stuff. But I think that maybe I would have gone back and made a few different decisions just based on that, having that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Being someone who's been through that, that is the teenage years, especially, I always like to ask this question when I'm talking to a father of boys, and the answers have been pretty consistent across the board. What is probably the most difficult age raising a son from your experience?
Oh, wow. The word difficult has so many different degrees to it. It was a challenge. It was a challenge for me as they got old enough to start challenging some of the things that I was teaching them. And to put a pin on that, I don't know, probably somewhere around 13 or 14, when they really started thinking for themselves. And the reason I say that too is, I didn't want to go down this road too much, but I coached youth football for a long time, but 7 or 8 seasons. And I got to see that transformation from a boy to a young man a bunch. Like, we're talking 30 kids at a time each season. I would get to see this. And it's on a spectrum. Some kids are a little bit faster, earlier bloomers than others. And I remember this one practice we had. We were going through our stretching drills, like the least intense period of practice. This is tackle football, and we're going through stretching. And I would always zigzag back and forth between the boys, and I'd have little small talk with them, just ask them if they watched the football game this weekend or whatever. And silently, I was checking them head to toe to make sure their gear was all right. And this one kid had a shoe untied, and I said, "Hey, man, you need to tie your shoe before we get going." And he just fell to pieces and started bawling, big crocodile tears. And I looked at him and said, "Really, dude? I told you to tie your shoe and you're crying?" And that just made it even worse. So then I had to send him over to his parents, and it got bad. But that was that transition period where they're going from being a boy and looking up to you, and you hung the moon, and you're painting blue paint on your face and yelling freedom when you run out the house to go to work every morning, to now I'm starting to understand a little bit about Dad, and I'm going to start challenging him on some of these things, and maybe I'll start poking the bear just a little bit. It didn't end well for the kids. That'll be a little side note there. It didn't end well for them, but I don't know what your other answers were. So hopefully that falls in line a little bit with what other people were saying.
Oh yeah, that's pretty bang on. So the average answer is like 12, 13. So
Yeah.
like that 13,
Yeah.
14. Yeah, it's all during that time when like you said, when you're seeing that transition from a boy to a young
Yeah.
man, is there's so much that they're figuring out. And I coach sports as well. I coach basketball team, and I have
Yeah,
a
right on.
bunch of 12, 13-year-old boys. And you know, a lot of the conversations I have with the parents, and you know, my experience with a 14-year-old now who's, you know, kind of at the tail end of that, you know, a lot of consistencies that happen around that time frame with boys.
It's a unique time, man. And you know, just like little girls turn into women, you know, there's a very specific event that happens to a female that identifies that transition. And while males may not have that very specific biological event that happens to them, they absolutely go through the same transition. And
Right.
it's unique. It's thank goodness I had a house full of boys. I don't know if I could have done it with girls, but it, you know, we had our middle kid. He was probably the more sensitive of the bunch, just in general. And I remember I might have been his 9th or 10th birthday, maybe his 11th birthday. He cried all day. He just cried all day because we wanted to take him to see G.I. Joe in the theaters. How do you plan for that? How do you expect that? How do you measure, and how do you deal with it? That's probably the most important part, because, you know, I mean, I'm a military guy. I just want to, hey, we're going to go outside in the yard and do PT until you stop crying, you know, but I guess you can't do that with the kids, especially if you want it to resonate with them. So show a little patience, have a little grace.
Yeah. And then so you had the three boys, and then you mentioned a bonus son. So you know, 4 boys to me, you know, that sounds pretty busy. I know obviously your oldest, you said, isn't in the home anymore. So just with me and my social work background, it sounds interesting. I would love to hear how your bonus son came about.
Yeah. It's a this story gives me a lot of pride from a family perspective, you know, and going back to the book that I wrote and the things that I've tried to teach my kids since they were little bitty boys was just be a good dude, be a good human, be good to your people, be polite, be considerate, have honor, you know, live your life with character. And this story started, gosh, it's been probably 6-7 years ago. This story started when my youngest boy was in 5th grade, 5th or 6th grade. And he started hanging out with a little bit of a different crowd at that point. Now, he was, up until this point, he was the class nerd. He was the straight A guy. He was the kid that you wanted on your project because you knew that Caleb was going to do the project and it was going to be 100% and it was going to be good. And the whole team was going to get a good grade. And he was the kid that was going up in the front of class in between projects to help the other kids because he was just a really good student. And we started noticing his grades slipping. All of a sudden, he's making D's and F's. I'm like, what the heck? What's going on here? And it took us a couple of weeks of setting him down, you know, every day or two and kind of scratching at it to figure out what we could make of it. And we found out, he finally told us that he had been hanging out with these other 2 kids, and they were both kind of known to be knuckleheads, didn't really take school seriously, skipped school a lot. Just their parents were what I would call probably a laissez-faire type parent, just really, you know, didn't include them in a whole lot, didn't set a lot of left and right boundaries, things like that. So I don't know, a few weeks go by and I set my son down and I said, look, man, this is a good turning point in your life, right? This is a chance where you get to have some influence. Rather than let those boys influence you in a negative way, why don't you try to influence them in a positive way? Took a few weeks. Caleb's grades started getting back up, and he brought one of the kids over to the house one time to stay the night on the weekend. And I was 100% convinced that this kid's a knucklehead, right? And he spent the weekend with us. And during that weekend, I convinced this boy to come and play football for me that fall. This was, you know, kind of in the springtime. And I convinced him to come play football for me that fall. So he signed up and he came to our football team. And this kid he turned into a rock star. He had something to focus all that energy on. And he ended up starting on both sides of the ball and helped us on our way to go 9-0 and winning a championship that year. At the same time, my son, this other boy who ended up being my bonus son, and the other knucklehead, they all three got inducted to the National Junior Honor Society. So that positive influence from my kid to them, it really worked. It rubbed off on them. And I was like, holy crap, this stuff isn't, I'm not just making this stuff up or pulling it out of a hat. You know, it actually, it's tangible. You can influence people to change their lives. And I think that at that point, our family had an impact on those two kids. Now, one of the kids, he regressed and he went a different way, and he's not in a good space right now. The other kid, however, about this time last year, we had an opportunity for our 20-year-old, our middle son, to move out of the house. And he was just moving right down the road into an apartment or into another house here where him and two of his friends were going to rent it and kind of start getting used to real life things, paying bills and managing their money. And we're still right down the road, so we can help him and all that. It was a really good situation for him. And almost to the day, my youngest son came in and asked, could this boy come in and move in with us? His home life had just deteriorated right around him. His parents had split up, and it was his stepdad and his mom. His mom moved down to Inner Phoenix. We live on the west side out here. And he wanted to stay out this way, to stay with his bros, to stay with his friends and finish high school out here. So he was sleeping on his dad's couch, and all of his stuff was in a box at the end of the couch in the living room. That was his living conditions. So Caleb asked me, could he come and move in with us? And I was like, hell yeah, bring him on. So kid moves in. They took my boy's truck and threw everything that he owned in the back of it. It was a twin size mattress and like a box full of clothes. And he moved into our house, and he's been here for a year. And I really took that challenge as, you know what, now I've got a chance. Here I am writing this book. Here I am watching my kids get ready to move out of the house for the last time. And I've got a chance to basically start over and see what I can do with this young man who's never really had that level of parenting, that level of influence, positive influence on his life. So one of the first things that we did was we sat him down and we gave him the left and right boundaries of the family. These are the times that you guys can go out and do what you want. These are the times that we want you back at the house. These are our house rules. Keeping in mind that this kid had never had any rules like that. And it was a little bit of a shock to his system, especially the first time he broke a few of the rules and we held him accountable for them. But you know what? It really didn't take long, probably 2 or 3 weeks it took, and he settled right in. And he's about to be the first of 5 brothers to graduate high school. He's the only of the 5 brothers that hasn't knocked up his girlfriend yet. And I've got him scheduled to enlist and join the Air Force here in just a few months. In fact, he and I just sat down for about an hour last night and had a really good meeting over what he's going to do in the military and where he's going to go and what his dreams and goals are. All goes back to 5th grade, when we had an opportunity to either let them influence us or try to influence them. And if I had any kind of message towards anybody, that would be what it is. That's what I have all over my website. That's what I have in my other books. And that's what I have a lot of in this book, Work Hard, Don't Suck, is your influence on other people. You never know who it's going to touch, and you never know who you're going to inspire to make change. So just be the best version of yourself and let that permeate.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a great compliment to your family unit, right? That one, your son would even be comfortable enough to come to you and, say, can we have him come in, right? Like, a lot of people wouldn't be open to that. Also, the fact that you have this person who's coming in, and my mind goes to the fact that, I think all kids will say this at one point, that like, oh, it's not as good here. It's better at the next house. It's better. Oh, really?
Yeah.
And this is the real reality that, like, what you have, it's really good. And, there's lots of people out there who would like what it is you have. Right. And this is, a prime example of that. But
well, the grass isn't greener over there. The grass is green where you water it. So
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that.
be where you are and try to be the best version of yourself, you know. And for us, luckily, fortunately, we were in a position where I had one moving out. It didn't cost me a
Yep.
whole lot, you know. It wasn't that big of a change, but we recognized the level of impact that we could have
Mhm.
on that one kid. And you know, it's not, to me, it's not about you know, bragging and seeing how good we are and all that, but we just believe in being good people around here.
Yep.
And whatever your definition of that is, that's fine. But the more people that we can influence to be better versions of themselves, then I just think
Mhm.
that world makes the world a better place. If people were to focus less on, you know, what their neighbor is doing and more on what they're doing, I think we all win.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Now, so we definitely did a deep dive there on the be a good dude. Well, what was probably your next favorite, or you know, any chapter that you'd like to highlight, so we can kind of
Oh,
go into that topic.
every one of them, to me, every one of them are, because you know, and you said, well, you know, you really chopped it down from 160 to 61. I didn't really chop it down. I just chose 60. Sorry, my dogs are going nuts in the background.
You're
Um,
good.
I chose 60, and I plan to put out another volume of
Okay.
this in the future, hopefully next year. I've got a little polishing to do on some of the other ones. As I started writing them is really when it started to hit me that this was way too much for one project. And I think I have about 100 of them written total. So with a little bit of work and a little bit of tweaking, volume 2 is probably not going to be that much of a challenge moving forward. That said, there's a lot of them in here. We've had just in the last month, maybe, we've had some unique life events where I've picked up this book and said, you need to read this, you know, talking to my kids, go to the book and read this section right here. And a lot of it, I think is, you know, these values, these tricks and these tips that you learn over time. You learn them from other parents. I learned a lot from coaching football and dealing with other kids, not just mine. One of the things that I used to teach my football kids was I had my big three and my little three. And my big three, I would stand at practice every day, and I gather all the kids around and say, all right, and I'd just hold up 3 fingers, and they'd all quieten down. And I'd say, what's Coach White's big three? And they'd all yell out attitude, attention, and effort. All right, what's Coach White's little three? Accountability, responsibility, humility. And over the course of a season, we would make sure that we kept hitting those big three, little three on what exactly they meant. So attitude, attention, and effort. I mean, these are simple tips on how to be a good person every day, right? And how to achieve something every day. Have a good attitude. When you wake up in the morning, you have a choice of whether or not you're going to have a good attitude or a bad attitude. When your boss tells you to do something, you have a choice of whether or not you're going to stick with that and have a good attitude, or whether you're going to be kind of upset about it. And I think if you have a good attitude, it opens up a part of you that's more, you become kind of a sponge. You're open up to learning at that point. You're opening up yourself to a little bit of experience. A bad attitude is kind of a barrier to growth in a lot of ways. You combine that with paying attention to what's around you all the time. Every little thing throughout your day, throughout just a regular boring day, if you pay attention, there's a lot of little good lessons in there. When the guy cuts you off in traffic, you have a lesson in patience, or you can explode and start yelling. By the way, there's a chapter in this book called Apples Don't Fall Far from the Tree. If you're the kind of guy that explodes and starts yelling obscenities at the other drivers, guess what your kid in the back seat's going to do when he gets his driver's license? See? So all these things kind of feed off themselves. And then finally, the end of the big three is effort. If you just give maximum effort in everything you do, combine that with a good attitude and paying attention, then I think you're well on your way to success, however you define that.
Okay. And then, so you talk about being a champion in your own life. So does that fall under what you were just talking about, or is that something different?
Yeah, well, you know, specifically getting to be winning as I define it is a process. I'm a military guy. I like processes, step 1, 2, 3 kind of things. And to me, winning is a process. If you can plan your events plan them in detail, right down to the last penny, and then posture your resources correctly. So plan, posture, and then perform. And if you perform at a high level, then I think you can win. And if you start to win enough, then you create a little bit of momentum. Momentum makes you want to win more. So you work harder at that. And the more momentum that you build and the more you start winning, it starts to become kind of a drug to you. And you almost become addicted to the process of winning and making yourself better. And that's when you see that champion attitude come out. To me, being a champion is a combination of desire, discipline, and skill. And if you can put those three things together at a very high level, then I think you're doing good. Now take that in, you can take that into sports. You know, you said you were a coach. You can take that into your everyday practices and your season plans and whatnot, or you can just take that into your everyday. From the time your alarm clock goes off, what do? Do you hit the snooze button, or do you get up and put your feet on the floor? If you hit the snooze button, then I can make an argument that you're starting the day losing, because that's not discipline. Right? You have a desire to get up and you have the skill to get up, but you lack the discipline to get up. So you got to put all those three things together. When that alarm clock goes off, you turn it off, you get up. The next thing I do is I make my bed every single day. I make my bed. So I'm already starting my day off with 2 wins right off the bat. And then I just kind of build on it from there and try every day to suck a little less, be a better version of myself than I was yesterday.
And just on that, I think that really takes away that victim mentality that, you know, I would say, I mean, I think for adults, you know, adults can face it, but also for kids and teenagers, right? It's like, it's the woe is me and like my life sucks or whatever. And it could be over the smallest thing. We know, obviously, you know, kids can have, you know, that tunnel vision every once in a while, but just in teaching them, you know, this champion mentality that you say, it really will help deter them from thinking like, oh my goodness, life sucks. Like, oh, I'm such a victim in this whole situation, right?
Well, how many times as parents do we kind of get lulled? I don't want to say lulled to sleep. That's not the right word. That's not what I'm thinking. It's we hate getting onto our kids for the same things every single day. Right. So if your kid's making the same mistake over and over and over, it really sucks when you have to sit them down on the couch and have that 1 hour dad talk with them every day. It gets old for everyone. And it's so at some point, it's like Charlie Brown's teacher, just that wah, 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 wah. They're not even listening to you anymore. Right. But I think it's important to give the kids responsibility and then hold them accountable for the responsibility. And this is where I disagree with a lot of what society has shifted to in the last 10, 15 years or so, with this kind of everybody's special kind of mentality. And everybody, you paid your $20, you get a trophy just like everybody else. No, man, dude, in life, there's winners and there's losers. If you want to be a winner, you have to do these things. Like, you can't just go into your boss on day one and say, hey, get out of my chair. I'm going to be the boss now. It doesn't work that way. All right. There is a certain rite of passage. There's a certain amount of paying your dues. There's a certain amount of effort that you're going to have to put in to be able to climb up to the top. And the person who puts in the most effort is the person that's going to win. That's really what it comes down to. Sure, aptitude and skill come into that at some point, but those things can be learned to a degree. What takes no talent is showing up on time, being prepared, and working harder than the other guy. If you work harder than the other guy consistently, your boss is going to recognize that. You're going to be the one that gets the awards and the promotions, not the other dude. So the earlier that we can start teaching these kids these things, I just think that we're all going to be better off in the long run. This next generation coming up, they only know this kind of equity mindset. And you said it right there, that the victim mentality. Well, it's so easy to be a victim now. Well, I didn't do it. It was so-and-so did it. The electricity went off last night. My alarm clock didn't work. At some point you have to start taking ownership of your life, you know, and you have to be an active participant in the acceleration of your life narrative. And if you're waiting on other people to do that for you and tell you it's okay to be mediocre, then that's what you're going to be forever. You're just going to be mediocre. If you want to be a winner, if you want to be a champion, then do champion things. Get out there and work harder than the other dude.
Yeah. And you kind of use the example as well of your son and his 2 friends. How important do you think the people that you surround yourself with are in being your best self?
Yeah, that's a big part of our project, the 1 to 5 project, is Jim Rohn's quote was, "You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." And as soon as I say that to somebody, they start thinking about the 5 people that they hang out with the most, which is good. All right. You do need to do some level of inspection and figure out who you're surrounding yourself with. That old saying, if you want to be a millionaire, surround yourself with millionaires and you'll become a millionaire, right? You'll start doing millionaire things. If you want to be a champion, hang out with champions. You'll start doing champion things. Well, in the 1 to 5 project, we kind of reverse engineer that just a little bit. And we say, rather than look at who's influencing me, I want to look at who I'm influencing. So now I'm one of the 5 people that's doing the influencing, and I get really selfish on it. It's all about the individual, and you just look at yourself and try to make yourself the best version that you can every day, and let other people start to notice that. Hopefully that inspires them to make a little bit of change on their part, and now everybody's average is going up, right? So yeah, it's important. I think it's super important to surround yourself with the right people, but it's also important to make sure that you're doing your part and having the level of influence that you can, and taking care of your business. No more woe is me. Everybody's influencing me to be a bad person. No, dude. You have a choice. You can choose. Be a good person. Go do good things, and then let other people aspire to do those things as well.
Mm-hmm.
I guess at the end of the day, be that person that somebody wants in their 5, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to put it. I want to maybe, you want to be the kid that's picked first on the kickball team. Be the good dude. Be the one that people want to hang out with because you have a positive energy about you.
Right.
You don't have to be, I'm not saying that you have to lift the most weights or run the fastest or make the most money or go to church the most. I'm just saying you need to be the person that has the most positive attitude on things, has a good outlook. You treat your family well. You love your wife. You show your kids what it means to love your spouse and how to lead your family. And you make those tough decisions. We all know by the time we get to this point in our life, we know that oftentimes the right choice is the hard choice. Make those hard choices and let your kids see that. And if the kids see that from a very early age, if they see me holding my wife's hand and grabbing her butt every time she walks through the house and little things like that, then maybe that will inspire them to, when they get a significant other and start dating, that they'll want to do those things, and they'll want to show that affection and lead from a position of love and example rather than authority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then just that other point in regards, for the kids and who you're around, it's like, you don't want to be picked necessarily because you're the best. You want to also be picked because you're a good person, because you add, right? And so like, you're dealing with a team, basketball or whatever, like the top 3 choices on the team, it's not necessarily because they're the best players. Maybe they're the ones who are able to get the team together, get them hyped up and all that kind of stuff. Like everybody has a role, right? I think that's important to remember. And it's not just about being the best at something, but also what you can provide to everybody.
And to that point, actually, it was kind of a moment that I was really happy to see. It was last summer. All of our kids went to basketball camp. Well, the 3 oldest did. And our oldest son, he ended up being named for his age group the player of the week. Nice. And, he only really played organized basketball with the school team the year before and had played house league that same year. So, and I was saying, like, there was rep players there, weren't there? And he said, well, yeah, but it wasn't all just based on skill. It was based on behavior and, the type of kid that you were during the week. So that was kind of, to your point, is one of those things that,
let that character come out. Yeah. Let that character come out and let that shine through. And sometimes that'll overcome some talent. It'll overcome some skill, and unfortunately, a lot of times in youth sports, it's so focused on who has the skills and talent to make the play right then. And really, I think you see a transition when you go into high school sports, where now they're young men at this point, and you start to kind of break out who are the leaders of the group. And some kids lead by example. Some kids are silent leaders, and other kids are vocal leaders. They're the rah-rah people like you were talking about. And you need both kinds for sure. But oftentimes I think in youth sports and younger sports and younger clubs, it's harder to differentiate that because they just haven't gotten there yet in their personal development piece of it. And I got to see this with the kids that I coached as they moved up into high school and then, into varsity sports. I got to see a few of them that I thought were going to be the leaders of the group. They just kind of fell flat. And then others who are really quiet and really silent on the team, those are the ones who stepped up and took those leadership roles, which is it's always awesome to see that when a kid steps into a role like that. And I think that you hit something very special there when you said everybody has a role, and that just goes for all of life, right? Mm-hmm. You have a role. You guys have roles in your house. My wife and I joke about mom jobs and dad jobs. My job is to maintain the cars and clean up the weeds out of the yard. And her jobs are, mostly inside the house and doing things like that. And we kind of make a little comedy show out of it. But every team is comprised of members, and every member has a specific role. Look at your basketball team. Look at my football teams. That's 11 people on the field doing 11 different jobs. And if one of those kids doesn't focus on his job, if he's more worried about what little Johnny's doing across the field, not doing his job, well, then now both of them suck. And now the team is starting to fail. So know your role and perform your role at a high level. And I think everybody wins at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Now, since we kind of went there and you just mentioned football, I'm curious to know, how did you get involved in coaching?
By accident, complete accident.
Isn't that always the case?
Yeah.
Gosh. So, I mean, our family, we've been a football family. I mean, I was a football player when I was young, and all of my kids, when they were very, very young, they all started playing tackle football. And being in the military, I didn't have the time to devote to it, because I'm the kind of guy when I go into something, I go all in. And I wasn't ready to commit to coaching because I knew I couldn't give it the effort that it deserved. So a few years had gone by. My kids are getting a little bit, they've been playing for a few seasons now. And the organization lead, the head guy, he called me up and goes, "Man, come on. I mean, you really need to coach this team." And I agreed that year to be an assistant coach. And I was like the fifth guy. So I was the lowest on the pole. I mean, I wasn't even planning to be at every single practice because my military job took so much time. And that's kind of the way I framed it. I said, I will give you what I can when I can, kind of thing. Well, about 2 weeks into the season, two of our coaches quit or got fired. One of them got caught in a background investigation. He had a gambling addiction, so he was gone. And the other guy just walked. And then I think it was the second game, I was the only coach on the sideline. The other two guys just didn't even show up. So now it's me. Yeah, it's like me and my 12 or 13-year-old son over here trying to maintain. We're trying to run the offense, trying to run the defense, all the special teams. We're trying to count all the minimum plays for the players. Each player had to play like 4 plays per half or something. And we're trying to win. I mean, golly. So I got thrown into it. And that season was my worst. That was the worst season. It was, players weren't happy. I wasn't happy. Parents were more than unhappy. I got yelled at. I got yelled at after games so many times. I got accused of a lot of things that I didn't do, and I just kind of had to bite down real hard, and because I wasn't going to cause a scene. I had a parent march across the field after. We had a bad beat. It was bad, and this team that beat us ended up winning the championship that year, and they just mopped the floor with us. And one of the parents marched out into the field as I was picking up my coach's bag and putting it on my shoulder, and he chest bumps me and says, "You and me are about to have a talk, boy." No, sir. No, sir, we are not. Not until you can talk to me like a man. And I turned around and walked away, and we ended up resolving it. He was mad because his kid wasn't the quarterback. That's pretty standard. Everybody's kid is the best player ever, and everybody's kid needs to be the quarterback. And you kind of learn, that's like water off a duck's back. You just kind of learn to go with that one. But the next season was special. Again, didn't plan on coaching. Took my kid to the first practice. We moved from Idaho to Phoenix. Brand new team. We didn't know a single person out there. We heard about this team on Facebook, and we signed up with them. And we showed up to the first practice. My my kid goes out there and starts throwing some balls. And I was kind of over on the side, just reminding him, hey, man, you haven't thrown a football in a year. Just remember your mechanics, remember your arm, and all, whatever. After practice, the coach comes up to me and I said, hey, man, I can help you when I can help you. I can't promise I'll be here every day, but I can help you a little bit here and there. And he goes, all right, well, you sound like a pretty offensive minded kind of guy. So you run the offense, I'll run the defense, and it'll be great. Right. Okay. No kidding. True story. The next practice for the next 3 weeks, he was gone. He ghosted.
Oh boy.
And there I am again, all by myself with my whistle. I didn't know any of these kids. I didn't know any of the parents. And here I am standing out there trying to run a football team all by myself. But there's the difference here, right? And here's the lesson. This is the lesson that I'll ask everybody to take away from it is in between those 2 seasons, I sat down and I'm a furious note taker. I always, every game that I coached, every practice that I had a piece of paper and a pen in my pocket. And I would write down little notes. Little Johnny didn't give effort on this play. Little Bubba didn't play over here or whatever it is. And I took all of those notes and I still have it. It's a running Word document for that whole season, that really terrible season. I had all of those notes captured. And in the off season, I had gone back and I had read through those notes and I had said, or I made some notes at the bottom that said keys to success next time. And under that, I had notes like how to deal with the parents, how to schedule and script a practice so that we had very pointed instruction and coaching that had a purpose. And we weren't out there just willy-nilly doing drills. Everything that we were going to do the next time was going to have a purpose to it. And I took those lessons learned and those keys to success. And even though that other coach didn't show up for 3 weeks, by the time he came back, we were a different squad. We came in and our warm-up session was perfect. We had it nailed because one day at one practice, we did our warm-up session for about an hour and a half. I said, this is our goal today is we're going to get this piece perfect because if we can go out on the field and warm up and sound like a championship team, it's going to strike fear into the other guys. And they're going to wonder, well, we're not that good. We don't do our warm-ups that good. And if we do our warm-ups that good and we sound that awesome in our warm-up session, what's that translate to for game performance? So now you're already getting into the other team's head by doing this. We set a standard of discipline and detail in those first 3 weeks, and we went 8-0 and won a championship based on being able to capture those lessons learned and apply them from those notes of getting chest bumped in the middle of the field and being accused of some really nasty stuff. I was able to extract some good lessons, apply them, and our kids went out and had a champion season. It was pretty awesome.
Now, one of the things too that can be difficult for a coach, because I've seen this go a lot of different ways, but coaching your own kid. Any tips on how to navigate that area? Is that and I'll kind of share some of the experiences I've had. I've played on a team where there was a coach who, for whatever reason, I guess he didn't want to look like he was favoring his son. So he was extremely hard on his son. His son almost never played. I remember he threw him out of a game at one point. And then,
I might have been guilty of that once or twice.
and then I've seen the opposite end of the spectrum too, where a kid who probably shouldn't have been playing nearly as much, playing a lot because again, his dad is maybe trying to appease him or whatever.
Yeah. The old daddy ball, playing the daddy ball game. As hard as it is, and this was so. My example of this is the last season that I coached. The last season that I coached my kids. My kid was the quarterback. My kid and I had designed and built our offense from the ground up. We used to sit in my lazy boy in there with a big whiteboard and we would draw plays and he would come up with the audibles and we would figure out how we're going to communicate this, that, and another to the other players. So he was an integral part to not just the execution, but the planning process of it. He knew that offense inside and out. And at 11 and 12 years old, I've got him out there killing plays and making audibles on the field based on what he's seeing from the defense and stuff. There was a level of trust there, right? Well, this last season, we had a player come to our team that was supposedly this high-flying quarterback, right? And I lined them up side by side in the first few practices and had them take some snaps and throw some balls. And his dad ended up being one of my assistant coaches. And he probably called me 10 times asking me why his boy's not getting to play. And I very simply told him, I was like, look, man, your kid's got tremendous arm strength. All right. Aside from that, he can't execute my offense. So it was, and I gave him objective, detailed reasons why he wasn't going to be my quarterback. And sure, it probably looked like a lot of nepotism and favoritism, but in the end, it came down to objective reasoning and execution. My son had a encyclopedic knowledge of my offense, and the other kid didn't. My kid was athletic enough to run the plays and make the audibles and run the options and do the RPOs and all that thing. And the other kid was not. The other kid had a really strong arm. And beyond that, he just wasn't there. Now, if you want to go play 7-on-7 and throw the ball around the field 50 yards, that's fine, dude. I got no problem with that. But for the style of football that we're playing, you're not the guy. So I guess to answer your question, it would be, as painful as it is sometimes, you just have to be objective. If your kid ain't the kid, he ain't the kid. Mm-hmm. Put the best 11 people on the field to win the football game. Yep. Now, let's back that up just a little bit. Youth sports is supposed to be fun, right?
Yeah.
Youth sports is supposed to be a good time. And if you're going out there with this mindset of championship or bust when they're 8 years old, that I could argue that's probably the wrong mindset. At that point, we want to develop a love for the game. And this goes to all sports for male, female, doesn't matter, right? Develop a love for the game. Develop those soft skills like showing up on time and being prepared, and the work ethic and the expectation that when you step between these lines, we hold ourselves to a standard, right? And then as the kids grow up and as they move up through the year groups, by the time they get to about 11 or 12 years old, I think that's when you can kind of flip it just a little bit and go, okay, guys, enough of playing tag before practice. Now we're going for trophies. Like you're turning into young men, and now we're going to start treating you like young men. This is competitive, and we're going to really put on our big boy panties when we go out here, and we're going to compete hard. So that's the way I approached it. I'm sure that other people will differ with that. That's fine. But I got 2 4-foot trophies over in my corner that look pretty good right now. So.
Well, but I think you hit the nail on the head there. One thing that I heard, again, just trying to gain as much knowledge as I could about coaching, is that especially with the youth, you don't want to be their last coach, right? Yeah. You don't want to give them an experience that pushes them away from the sport, or even if they decide that, football or basketball or whatever it is that you're coaching isn't for them, that they don't lose their love for sport. They go to do something else. You don't want to, you don't want to push them away from the athletic competition.
Yeah. But I mean, I played sports when I was growing up. I started playing sports when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and played all the way through up in high school and college. And those coaches that were the hardest on me are the ones that I remember the most. And I still look back, I graduated high school many, many years ago, but I still remember that high school football coach and some of the things that he used to tell us that are really good life lessons. And we won a lot of football games. You want to make sports fun? Guess what's fun? Winning. Winning is fun.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, the coach is the one that has to put you in those situations to get you to that point. Look at Nick Saban, right? I'm an Alabama fan. I'm an Alabama boy. I was a Bama fan when Bama wasn't cool. And thankfully, Bama's been cool for a little bit now. But
I was going to say, right now, they're really cool.
They're really cool now. Nick Saban's one of the best team builders out there. And he tells his boys straight up, if you're not willing to do everything it takes to be a champion, there's the door. Don't even entertain coming out here. If you're going to half-ass it, I don't want you. We require everything, right? And I was watching this really cool documentary. This is in my book, by the way. I was watching this really cool documentary with Nick Saban and Kobe Bryant, right? And during the offseason, Nick Saban brings in these people to give these motivational speeches, and they were doing this documentary in Nick Saban's office. These two are talking, and somebody had asked Kobe what it takes to be a champion, and he was kind of going down that list of being the first in, last out, doing what other people's won't do, and so that you can do what other people can't and all that. Nick Saban threw out this line that I just love, and I've hung on to it. He goes, everybody wants to be the beast, but nobody wants to do what beasts do. And I love that, right? Because everybody wants to stand on top of that podium, but very few people are willing to put in the work that it takes to get there. And I think if we can start teaching our kids that when they're 11, 12, 13 years old, this goes all the way back to 30 minutes ago. We were having this conversation about competing and not being a victim and giving effort and all that. The sooner we start teaching our kids that if you want to be on that podium, whether it's at your job or at the marathon that you're running, dude, you got to do the work. Sorry, man. You got to do what beasts do if you want to be the beast.
Yep. And I was just going to say, and it's that behind the scenes, right? Like stuff your coach may never see that you've done right at home. And when you get to that age here, we have that fair play when they're young. Everybody gets the fair amount of time, but as soon as you get to around that 12-year mark where you're going in, even though you were not on the starting line, but all of a sudden coach is seeing you, that work that you were putting in when nobody else was watching. And I mean, like, what a compliment to a kid, right? And that right there shows them, okay, and it makes them want to keep going and set those goals.
If you teach a kid that when they're 12, 13, 14 years old, and they can apply that when they're 24 years old after college, or maybe they're a year into their trade school or whatever they're doing, whatever they choose to do with their life, they take that same mentality that they learn. It's like, oh, well, my coach used to tell me that if I just worked harder than the other guy, then I can achieve, right? And they take that into their personal life with their marriage, their relationships, their business, or their professional lives, or the way that they parent. This stuff applies across the board, and look at somebody like me. Like, I mean, my kids are leaving the house. I've already had 2 careers. I'm working on another one, right? I don't have anything to prove to anybody, but I still get out there and get mine every day. It just kind of becomes who you are at some point, and people notice that. People notice, hey man, he's out there 47 years old and he's got a 45-pound rucksack hiking up and down the hills out here in the desert when it's 110 degrees. Well, I'm not doing that to show off to anybody, certainly not at my age. I don't have anybody to show off to. I'm doing it because that's what I do. It's just become who I am. You know what I mean? So if you can instill those principles and that discipline and that character in these kids when they're young, this is exactly why I wrote this book, is to give people the back cover text goes something like this. When my kids were born, all 3 of my boys, when they were born, nobody gave me a checklist that says, teach them all this stuff in the next 18 years and they'll be good dudes. I had to make it all up, and I hoped that I did it right. So I wrote the checklist.
There you go.
That's awesome. And just to go back to that example, don't get me wrong. The coach that I remember the most, who was pretty impactful, was coach I had my senior year of high school. He was a yeller. I remember actually when I played against him in a rep game, he actually threw a chair across the court while we were shooting a technical foul free throw. Right. But when I actually had him as my coach, like he came with that same intensity, but like it was what I needed. But if I had probably had him when I was 8 years old playing basketball and he was that coach, may have pushed me out of the sport. So that's the only kind of comparison I was trying to draw there. But you mentioned that you were doing a little coaching now, and one of the challenges that I have always loved, I've been a flight instructor for a long time. I've been a coach for a long time. One of my favorite challenges is learning how to communicate with individual players, and we get 30 kids out there, and I might know 8 or 10 of them, and the rest of them are new kids, new to our system, new to our program, new to me, whatever it is. And you have to learn how to communicate with each one of them. Now, my kid, because he's grown up in my house, he's been playing football since he was 6 years old. I can grab him by the face mask and throw him around the field and yell at him and really dig in. And he responds to that. He knows at that point, he knows that he screwed up. And I send a message to the rest of the team, don't do what he just did, because I don't want to get yelled at like that. But then there's another kid where he just really needs you to put your arm around him and talk to him real soft like this and go, hey, man, we all make mistakes. You just made one. I ask you not to make that mistake again. Go full speed. Know that you're going to screw up. Let's try to not make the same mistake twice. So learning where that middle ground is of who you can really dig in on and literally kick them in the butt. I had one kid that I got behind him and I started kicking him in the butt to get him up a hill. We were doing bear crawls up a hill one time. And he was crying the whole time. And then after practice, he came up to me and gave me a big hug, him and his dad. And he goes, thanks for pushing me, coach. You made me realize I can do more than I thought I could. Yeah, duh. That's the point, man. So
Yeah, that individual coaching is it's unique and it's fun. It's a cool, fun puzzle and riddle to kind of figure out sometimes.
Yeah, no, and it's one of those things too, like kind of what we've been talking about. Like those things are things that can apply in life as well, because you have the same experience at home. Like all the four boys that you've had an impact in their life, they all have a different personality, and I'm
Oh yeah,
sure the
100%.
communication with all of them is different, right?
100%. They're all different. Yep. Kids, it's funny. It's like, yeah, every one of our kids, we would try when they were little, we would say, oh, well, he's going to grow up and he's going to do this. And then this kid's going to grow up and he's going to follow in my footsteps. And then this kid's going to go off and he's going to do this. And they get their own vote. And we were 100% wrong on all three of them. 100%. So it's neat. They are individuals, and you have to treat them that way. Learn to communicate with them and learn what resonates and what doesn't. I can tell you with my oldest one, yelling at him didn't work. He responded much better to the disappointed dad speech. My youngest one, he responds to the very stern, very direct. Maybe that's why he's the one that's going into the military, but that's, practice on your kids, practice on your players. And, I think over time, maybe you get better at it and you hope for the best in the end, but hope is not a tactic. So I don't know.
Oh man. No, yeah, as long as you're, doing the best, doing the right things, we have the checklist now in work hard, don't suck. So we have something to work with. We have some framework there.
Well, you've at least got it from my brain to paper. I'm not gonna volunteer that it's the best or the right. It worked for me. And my hope is that people will read it and it'll inspire them to put their own stories and their own spins and their own narratives on the ones that I've written. Because I don't think there's anything in here that's hugely contestable or people are going to be offended by any of it. There's some direct talk, there's some real talk in there, but I mean, who's going to argue with having a good character? And who's going to argue with being a disciplined person day in and day out? And who's going to argue with managing your finances and having a budget? These are things that young people need to know. Parents need to know how to teach their young people these things. And I just put it all down so that maybe you can tell your own stories. You read it and you go, oh, okay, that resonates, but I can tell my own story and still get the same lesson. So that was kind of the point with it.
And I think the biggest thing though, is for someone who's especially a new parent, a lot of these things are things that we probably haven't considered going into it, right? Or things that, even when you try to check off all the boxes, you try to have a strategy for how you're going to handle this situation. You can't come up with every situation. So, and I'm sure, again, every situation is not going to be in the book, but it at least is going to get people thinking, like you said, for sure. It's going to get you thinking about, okay, I never thought of that. How am I going to deal with that? Right. So there is quite a bit of preparation I'm sure you can do from the knowledge and insights that you're sharing.
Well, I did. It took me about 2 months to gather my thoughts and really kind of get a list started. And I found that once I got going, it just like snowballed and ideas started coming out of the woodwork. And how many people really sit down and devote 2 months to brainstorming on their parenting strategies? I mean, most of us probably don't, because we're so wrapped up in the day to day. You're almost in reaction mode a lot of times. Sure, there's an element of planning to it, but I mean, to get to sit down for a couple of months and really reflect on 26 years of putting together puzzle pieces and making those tangible lessons that you can take away. I don't know that a lot of people have the time or the will to do that. So hopefully this will help somebody out that I'm not going to say it's a shortcut, but at least maybe it's an idea generator for you.
Yeah. Well, I think too, those are some of the things that we, that probably need a lot of planning, marriage and parenting, but don't necessarily get it, right? Like people think plan for the wedding, but anyways, I digress. As we start to wrap up here, Paul, what are some of the things that we can look forward to in the future? Obviously we know work hard, don't suck is on the way.
Yeah.
What else have you got up your sleeve?
So funny enough, I'm gonna get your email after we get off of here. But I've written a youth sports coaching guide, and I'm writing it right now. I'm writing it specifically to an organization that I've kind of been proxy or affiliated with now for 5 or 6 years. I know the guy very well. We're good friends. And after I won my last championship, I went back and I captured all these lessons learned over all the seasons that I coached. And I ended up writing a short book on it. It's really not that long. It probably take you an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to read through it, but it's not an X's and O's book. It's goal setting and team building and how to deal with referees and how to deal with parents and all those things, how to plan for a season and how to plan for a practice and how to plan for a game week and then a championship and kind of putting all those pieces together in a very formal style where, I think a lot of dads and moms get into coaching, like you said, by accident, and somebody hands you a clipboard one day and you really don't know what you're doing. And this is meant, the intent here is for you to be able to take this and learn how to at least get started and learn to, holy crap, man, there's a lot that goes into game day preparation. Like I have a huge Tractor Supply wagon out here that I used to throw all my water bottles and my bags and all this stuff in. And we had checklists, and I got all these digital products that I'm giving all to this youth organization. And we're going to give it out to all their coaches. He has about 40 coaches in his program, and we're going to give it all to them. And we're going to take their lessons learned and then we're going to turn it over to the public after this first season. So we're going to really polish that up, and I'll make sure I get you on my preview list for that so that you can check that one out. And then Work Hard, Don't Suck. That's the newest project. That one's going to be coming out. I'm guessing probably around the 1st of May. And we're super proud about that one. And then we got some other kind of hidden gems coming out. So stay tuned.
Awesome.
Oh, that's great.
Well, to keep up with Paul, I have the website here. So for those who are listening, the website is paulroscoewhite.com. And you're going to see that same handle is going to be his Instagram account as well. So Paul Roscoe White.
Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the same.
Awesome. Well, Paul, we really appreciate you taking the time to have this discussion with us. And we definitely enjoyed the discussion, and hopefully people learned a lot from this conversation.
Thanks, y'all. I really appreciate y'all's time. And that was enlightening for me because I don't get the chance to really deep dive into some of that stuff very often. So I appreciate the conversation. That was good.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And for everyone who watched or listened to this, thank you for letting us disrupt your everyday.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.